Hello, and welcome to this podcast. This is Professor David Lopez, and I'd like to welcome you to Elements of the Business Plan. The objective of today's podcast is to review the most common elements of a business plan, how they are used, and how to prepare them. The sections of the business plan we're going to review on today's podcast include the executive summary, the business organization, your management team, the industry that you're operating in, your ideal customer, the competition you face, the layout of your business, whether it's virtual or brick and mortar, your marketing plan, your sales plan and objective, as well as reviewing pro-forma financials, including the income statement, the balance sheet, and the cash flow statement. Lastly, we will review the specific funding request for additional capital. Let's talk about the executive summary first. The executive summary is viewed by many as being one of the most important sections of a business plan. Many investors, including venture capitalists, angels, and commercial lenders, receive many business plans on a weekly basis, and they only spend 5 to 10 minutes reviewing an executive summary to determine whether they should read further. So basically, the objective of an executive summary is to convince investors to read further. It should cover all the key points of the business plan. It's a high-level overview of how the business is going to be successful, discusses the market that the company is operating in, a brief description of the product or the service, some of the high points of the management team and why they feel they're in perfect shape to run a new successful company, an overview of the amount of money that they're seeking and how they're going to use it. And generally speaking, the executive summary is the last section completed because it's an overview of what's been researched and uncovered in the other sections of the business plan. The next section covers the business organization. Historically, this section would contain the mission statement of a company. It goes into great detail describing the business as a legal entity, what form of legal entity they chose, LLC versus corporation, etc. It outlines who are the owners of the business, how and why they started it. It gives an overview of labor strategy in terms of talent and other factors of production like raw materials. It's an overview also of how the company intends to make money and the type of investment being sought, whether it's equity or debt. The management team section of the business plan is critical. Most investors look to the talents of a management team as the primary reason for investment. Do they believe in the skills and motivations of the management team or do they not? So the management team section would have bios of current employees. A resume usually appears in the appendix section of the business plan. Most investors are going to look at checking references, so it makes sense to prepare references ahead and maybe include a letter of recommendation or a reference as well. The management team section should provide an overview of any relationships that the company has, whether it's informal, a board of advisors, board of directors. It's also very important to have an org chart of positions, even though they're not filled with real human beings yet. It just shows that you've thought out the larger organization in terms of positions and personnel needs. The management team section should also cover HR policies as well as, very specifically, senior management compensation plans as well as ownership percentages at this time. The next section of the business plan is an overview of the industry and the sector of the economy that the business is going to exist in. And this is done using library research or other very specific industry-related research. The objective here is to use the data to build a case for your business in the business plan. An investor would want to get a sense of the typical margins, market share for top players, as well as opportunities and inefficiencies in the market. This one very specifically is where new businesses tend to focus. If there's an inefficiency in the market or in the industry, does this company have a niche? And if so, it should be articulated here. In the industry section, it makes sense also to review the political, regulatory, and social landscape that the business will be operating in, and what are the trends. Also, what are the trends regarding new technologies and how they could change the industry. The next section to review in a business plan would be the customer section. The objective here would be to describe the ideal customer for the company, but also identify customer-related trends. Are they buying through different channels? How sensitive are they to price changes? And what are the customer needs? It's also here in the customer section that you would describe your customer service philosophy. No business plan would be complete without a section on the competition. The more specific, the better in this case. This will demonstrate to potential investors your knowledge of the competitive landscape and how your company fits in. Some of the questions to answer in this particular section would be, how hard is it to get into this business, otherwise known as barriers to entry? What companies make up the competition? Are they direct or indirect? What is your competitive advantage that will cause you to be successful over these companies that are already in the marketplace? Once the competition section is complete, it makes sense to then focus on the physical layout of the facilities and all of your operations. You should describe in detail the decision that you're going to make in terms of brick and mortar versus virtual. If it's just going to be a website, is there still an office somewhere, whether it's in someone's house, and are there expenses associated with that? If you're going to have a building, what are the leases? The rent should be laid out specifically in this section. If you're going to be manufacturing a product, will you be outsourcing or doing it domestically? Even down to the very simple parking, zoning, and shipping matters should be discussed in the facilities and layout section of the plan. The marketing section is an area that will show investors how well you know how you're going to be successful. If you were thorough in doing your market and industry research based on the industry section, you can now use that data to build a marketing plan. The marketing plan should have an objective of taking market share from the competitors that we discussed earlier. The marketing strategy at the highest level of the company is to create brand awareness and to create and convey the company message to its intended customer base. In this section, you should discuss your advertising strategy, whether it's print, electronic, social networks, sponsorships. You should also develop a public relations policy and look for opportunities to perhaps sponsor events to, again, create brand awareness and get your message out to your intended customer targets. There is a difference between marketing and sales. Marketing, again, the objective is to create brand awareness, while sales involves the actual creation of revenue from the sale of your product or service. Discuss in the sales section the selling method. Will it be personal one-on-one sales through a third-party channel, social networking? Discuss the sales compensation program, sales management policies and procedures. Describe in detail your sales plan as well as a selling expense policy. The sales plan will be used later to create Pro-forma Financials. Once the sales plan is complete, Pro-forma Financials can now be created. Basically, Pro-forma Financials refers to the concept of forecasting future financial performance. This is a section of the plan that involves a certain degree of speculation. You should be realistic. You should look 3 to 5 years in the future. Anything longer than that would be pure speculation and not deemed realistic. You're going to be using certain assumptions when you create these reports. Be specific as to what the assumptions are and allow for sensitivity to changes in those assumptions. Because most likely you'll be challenged by investment bankers, private equity individuals, venture capitalists, and other investors with regard to this section the most. And the three main statements we're going to be using would be income statement, balance sheet, and cash flow statement. Most business plans and feasibility studies conclude with a funding request. Hopefully you've laid out a story of a company, of a startup or a company that needs additional financing that sounds great, is a good idea, and now you want to fund it to get it to grow to the next level. So the funding request comes at the end, and it basically answers several questions. How much money is needed for whatever the purpose is? What is the purpose? What would the money be used for? The financing method, whether it's equity or debt, and the current company valuation. It's important in the funding request section to also describe the current financial structure and also the effect of new financing on the current stockholders. Does it dilute their holdings in any way? So in conclusion, several points to tie things together. When you're creating a business plan, make sure you write clearly and with conviction, because you're selling this business to potential new executives, suppliers, investors, and lenders. Use the draft process to improve the final product. And again, be realistic. It's critical, as mentioned before, to have a very strong executive summary, because generally speaking, this is the only section that most investors will read. And if it leads them to being excited about learning more about your company, the rest of the plan is there for them. Use feedback from your advisors and friends of the company. And last but not least, prepare an oral presentation that can be in the range of 10 to 15 minutes and be able to do this with or without slides. I'd like to thank you for listening. This is Professor David Lopez, and have a nice day.